Hi, my name is Jeff Feige. I'm with DriveLock, and today I'm going to show you how to install SQLExpress, DriveLock Enterprise Service, DriveLock Management Console, the DriveLock Control Center, all on a standalone Windows Server 2008 R2 Active Directory machine. There are a couple of caveats installing the SQLExpress directly on an Active Directory controller. We'll work through those. If you are installing this on a 2008 R2 server that is just joined to the domain, your installation procedure is a little bit easier, but you can follow along as well. So the first thing we're going to do is connect to our Active Directory server, our 2008 R2 server. We're going to be using the DriveLock ISO right at the moment, and one of the first things we need to do is create a service account, just a regular user account that the DriveLock Enterprise Service will use to connect to the SQL database, and also will run privileged as that user. So this user doesn't require any specific permissions, so we will call it SVCDES, a convention that we use. You can name it whatever you want, but for this purpose we're going to use what's in the manual. So we need to set a password, and then we need to make sure that it never expires. And this, as you see, is not anything other than a normal domain user. So we'll double click on the CD-ROM and go to English and click on installation, and this brings up the DriveLock DL setup executable. And you see here, normally what we would do, it's recommended that we install SQL Server first, then the Enterprise Service, and then we can install the Management Console, Control Center, and manuals. If you are installing this on a 2008 R2 server that is just joined to the domain, you can click on this checkbox here, click on Next, and basically I think there's two other nexts, and it will install, and you don't have to answer any questions. For our purposes, since we're on an Active Directory controller, we have to do it by hand. It's still pretty straightforward. So we'll browse content of the CD, and we'll right click here and run the SQLExpress installation package. As with everything Windowsy, it'll take a second here to come up. And we want to click on New Installation. And we accept the terms and click Next. Okay, here we can click Next. Now, here is where you can leave this SQLExpress if you were to use the automated installer. So again, if you had a 2008 R2 server just joined to the domain and you click that bottom checkbox to install, the named instance that it will use, because you will not get this configuration screen, is called DriveLock. And so we're going to do the same thing here so that it's consistent if you were to do it that way. So click Next. Here you will want to drop down the account name and select NT Authority System. Click Next. And we need to add that service account to the SQL Server Administrator. So SVC Des, check it. Okay. Click Next. Click Next. And Again, we wait. All right, so we're almost done here. Says we completed successfully. That's always a good sign. And you can now close the SQL Server Installation Center. We can go back to our DriveLock CD browser piece here. Click on Installation. Again, it'll bring up our DL setup as before. Now we can click on Enterprise Service. Click Next. Click Next, and it says installed, but actually what it's going to do is launch the installer at this point. It's a little bit confusing, but not all that much. So click Next, accept the terms of the license, and here is where we specify our SVC DES. So this is that service account that we created. Check, let's make sure it's correct, and then we put in our password. And then click Next, it'll validate, and we'll create a self-signed certificate. And if you have a firewall, you can check this and we'll automatically put in the service ports. I do not have a firewall enabled in my particular setup, but we'll leave it checked. It doesn't hurt anything. All right, so we can click on Finish, and then it'll pop up the database installation wizard. Okay. For our purposes here, again, this is a demonstration box. We're going to just leave this as it is. And then what we need to do here is type in the full name of the, or the short name of the machine that has a SQL Server instance. We can, since we're installing on the same machine, we can use localhost. And DriveLock was the name of the instance we had. For my purposes, the name of this machine is DES. So I will leave that there. We'll test the connection and see if it can make the connection to our database server. And again, like I said, since we're on this server, we can make it localhost, and we can test the connection. It will also show up correct. All right, we'll click Next. Generally speaking, you probably don't want to change these unless you have, if you're installing to a SQL Server out in your farm, you would make this different. But again, for our purposes, this is just fine. These two accounts here People kind of next over this and they don't really know what it means, and then they have problems a little bit later. So these are the accounts that allow you to have full control to the DriveLock Control Center and to the management console. So if you make these accounts a different domain account, say for instance your account, then in order to have full administrative privileges on that DriveLock Control Center, at least for the first time before you create other users, you would have to put in your credentials. So we're going to leave this as the domain administrator and go forward. And then we'll click next and we will wait. All right, database installation was good. Click next. Um, these are two settings that you can configure now or configure later. Um, for our purposes, I'm going to turn these off. What this does is deletes events in the database and does a daily database backup. In a production environment, you would certainly want to enable these if you have hundreds or thousands of endpoints. But again, for demonstration purposes, you probably want to keep as many events as possible so you can see, what's going on and what you may be doing right or wrong. Click next, click finish, and we are good to go. We will now install the last components, which will be the management console, the control center, and the documentation and manuals. Click next again, and it will install these components. And they are all installed. You can now close the browser windows, and we'll see here if we go to all programs, we have Center Tools DriveLock, and we now have our management console, a direct link to the local policy on this machine, and we're good to go. And we'll cover the initial configuration and other aspects in the next video. Thank you very much.